all kinds of weird shit. She cut a chunk of her hair off and left it on my friend's desk as a birthday present. Meowed at people and cried when anyone stepped on a bug. The most awkward incident happened when she dropped her pencil during a test. I guess she was too shy to ask the person next to her for it, so she tried to stretch for it and ended up flipping her desk over. She then continued to do her test in her desk sideways for another 10 minutes until the teacher told another student to flip her over. My professor for a computer science class had his phone go off during a lecture one day. He's a pretty chill old man. So everyone starts giggling and some people are yelling at him to answer it. He looks at his phone and says, "Oh no, I'm not answering. My brother died today and I have to make funeral arrangements. I'll call back later." And then he moved on with his lecture. I've never seen a room so awkwardly quiet and sad. I was in the 9th grade. And there was a girl in my classroom who broke both of her arms. So she had them in the cast that held her arms above her waist. Now this girl wasn't the most popular and she was best friends with another girl who was equally awkward as she was. I will never forget when the best friend raised her hand to get the attention of the teacher. The teacher called on the best friend. And she asked if she and her broken-armed friend could use the restroom together. And the teacher asks, "Why would you need to go together?" She replies just like this, "I have to unzip and take off her pants." Looking back, I understand now that she just wanted to help her friend use the restroom. But imagine being in 9th grade and you hear this. Everyone in the classroom was silent. Then one kid started laughing. Then everyone started laughing. And that is how the les rumors started about the two. High school can be a ick. This one time in 3rd grade, the boy next to me went under his desk and took his clothes off because he wanted to be invisible. My 30-year-old teacher admitted she was a virgin to a class of high school sophomores. That didn't end well. This mentally handicapped kid in my class named Mark was always super infatuated with this really smart, nice girl in our class. He would always talk about how he was going to make her his girlfriend and she was always just too nice to him to tell him it wasn't going to happen. This went on for years. Anyways, one day someone thought it would be funny to tell Mark I was dating the love of his life. I wasn't. Mark flipped his sheet and found me in the hallway and pushed me up against this gigantic topographical plaster map of Alberta. The Rocky Mountains cut into my back as he pushed me harder into it and yelled into my face while crying about how Tessa was his girlfriend and I need to leave her alone. I told him I wasn't dating her and he ran off crying. Poor guy. Edit, where do I exchange this gold for tangible money? In high school I reached down for a binder that was in my backpack on the floor. I reached down to grab it. And when I positioned myself back upright in my chair, I ended up scooping the teacher's Bobs, who was walking down the aisle, with my head. We just kinda looked at each other in fear and no words came out of either of our mouths. Nobody else saw it, or at least made a point to say that they saw it. I like to think it was just our little uncomfortable secret. So part of my job at the time had me meeting with teachers and schools to discuss alternative programs for students. One of the teachers had been working there for 20+ years. She had job security and would tell exactly what she thought. It led to some awkward exchanges when discussing students. Things like, "Oh, he's crazier than a red house rat. You don't want him in a place without heavy security." Double quote. The most awkward, however, was when she said she really gets around for a girl with one arm. Like a slot machine that pays out in BJS. I don't know if this is awkward or more uncomfortably sad. When I was in middle school, pretty tight-knit, a kid had died on Saturday. I had a couple classes with him but didn't know him that well. Well, on Monday my second class of the day had a sub and the kid who died happened to have been in that class. I guess no one clued the sub in, because she called his name during attendance. It was deafeningly silent and felt like the air was slowly being sucked out of the room. After a second or two she called his name again and several people burst into sobs and ran from the room. Then I heard someone whisper he died. Another teacher I had was absent that day too. I think he had some prior engagement as opposed to randomly taking a sick day, and the next day when he came back, the boy that died was also in this class. He was apologizing profusely for not being there for us and everything. At some point during his little speech he started crying and slammed his fist down on his desk. It was so sad. He truly felt awful for not being there that day. When I was in the 6th grade, one of my classmates took off his prosthetic leg and tried to hit the teacher with it. Florida? In 2nd grade of high school, a student flipped the F out and started throwing chairs and his desk at the teacher because he was refused a test reprisal upon failing it the first time. Shit got super scary. He was yelling like crazy and the female teacher was trying to protect herself from the things thrown at her. Another teacher next door barged in, grabbed the enraged student, nailed him on the floor, face down, and tied his feet and arms together with his belt and shoelace. I remember him being taken away and we never saw him again. I think the teachers ate him. My 10th grade geometry teacher was a heavier lady with bigger lace loppy boppies. If you know what I mean. Well, one day those warlocks just started to lactate out of nowhere. Like full streams running down her shirt via the nipple area. She decided to ignore this and continued to teach the class. A very disgusted class. Edit, no, my teacher was not Mrs. Jocksondick. Some kid that pulled his hard-on out during a movie to impress us. Not his girlfriend. Well, were you impressed? A friend of mine was bragging about how he could sleep with any of the girls in the class. My other friend decided to put his boast to the test by asking all girls at once. Loudly. The one guy that slept through every class raised his hand. This reminds me of a game people in my class would play. When the teacher would leave, these two kids would stand up on their desks and say in a gamma shell voice, "It's time for another exciting round of Who's Corey's Friend?" And then encourage anyone who was Corey's friend to raise their hand. Nobody ever did. Kids are cruel. We had a mentally challenged kid who stood up in the middle of lunch and threw his tray of food against the wall and ran out of the room screaming. The assistant principal walked past my table saying I guess he didn't like the soup. Guy just beating his meat during a history lesson. Full sweat on and everything. His grunting face is ingrained in me. Forever grunting. Some say he's still beating it in that classroom to this day. Kid in my sophomore math class would massage rub his girlfriend's bare feet for most of class. Every day. Whoa. 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 Stop right there. Eating a rich out. And giving a rich a foot massage ain't even the same duckin' thing. There was a kid in my school who was kind of problematic. One day, during a math test, he grabbed the test papers, went to the corner of the classroom and peed on them. Middle school chemistry class. The ceiling vent fan had not been used since at least the previous spring term. Pigeons had nested in it unbeknownst to the teacher. Fan use during a demonstration. Pandemonium reigned that day. Blood and feathers reigned that day. My period starting. I was also wearing a white dress and sat in front of a guy I had a huge crush on. Go me. There was two kids known for playing this joke on substitute teachers. It goes like this. Student A tells the sub to ask student B how many push-ups his grandpa can do. Student B tells a story, while pretending to cry, about how his grandpa lost both his arms in the war. Multiple substitutes broke out in tears crying and had to leave. During the lunch break, this guy who was eating a sandwich was on the verge of sneezing. So he finally sneezes and I see the piece of sandwich flying, I'm not kidding, into the mouth of my classmate who was busy laughing. His confused expression was priceless. I remember a substitute teacher that we had for a few days when I was in middle school. She was pretty overweight and one day she grabbed a chair from an empty desk to help someone out with their assignment. When suddenly we heard a loud crash. One of the legs on the chair had broken and she was flat on her back. It was hard not to laugh. But what made it even worse is as she was getting up, she ended up farting very loudly. The entire class erupted in a fit of laughter and she had to leave the classroom because she was so embarrassed. I once watched a kid stand on top of his desk then run around the room crying after the teacher asked him to stop. This was in high school. Girl fell while sitting at a desk in math class. Person beside me starts laughing. The look on his face when it became obvious she was having a seizure was that of pure terror and regret. Class bully pouring some of his own piss on the teacher's head. Teacher shrugged it off because it wasn't a lot and didn't know what it was. It wasn't me. But the stories were everywhere. In public grade school, our superintendent made a surprise visit and decided to sit in on a random teacher's class. She sat in the back to watch and these two boys in front of her were whispering to each other. She leaned in and whispered that they should pay attention. They did. But 2 or 3 minutes later started again. This apparently happened several more iterations before the SI leaned forward and slammed their heads together and shouted, "Pay the duck attention to your teacher." Fired before the end of the school day. Back in the 6th grade. I had a kid who always caused trouble and tried to be the center of attention all the time. Well, this kid had a weird way of flirting with girls, whether it would be to shoot spit gonads at them or pour water on them. One day he told all his friends that he will literally shit his pants during class in order to show off to the girls. During class you hear giggling and it began to smell like actual shit. Everyone looks at him because he was sitting in the back of class. And he stands up while laughing and says, "Teacher, I need to go to the bathroom, I accidentally shit my pants." With shit running down his legs he walks out of class laughing hysterically as if he had just won a Nobel Prize or something. BTW, he was never popular with the girls. I took French all through high school with the same group of kids. So we all grew pretty close. But there was one guy that never really seemed to fit in. One day we were learning the future tense when my friend and I noticed this kid blatantly staring at the chest of one of the attractive girls in the room. And then we noticed him put his hand in his pants and start masturbating. In class. In front of everyone. My high school economics class. A girl was called to the office with her things rather suddenly. About 2 minutes later she comes bursting into the room and yells, "My dad just died." The teacher immediately went to her to try and console her as she was justifiably distressed. Everyone in the room was in complete shock. She then yelled at the teacher to get off of her and threw her arm back and started hysterically darting around the room. Eventually her family member came to the room and got her. We could hear her sobbing down the hall. It was the craziest, most heart-wrenching thing I had seen in a class. The second most awkward thing involved the same girl about a year earlier. She nearly tried to fight our English lit teacher while he was dressed in a formal kilt and jacket. I don't remember why. She had to be escorted out by security. When I was taking chemistry in high school I had a pretty strange teacher, Mr. Harris. He was a good teacher and a nice guy but sketchy as hell and socially awkward. I had chemistry 7th period. And on early release days 4th period and 7th were switched. To make sure everyone got lunch the same time. Well, we were waiting for Mr. Harris for a good 15-20 minutes. When he come in. Shirtless. With lobsters clamped to his nipples. His face turned bright red and says, "It's 7th period? I thought it was 4th, never saw Mr. Harris again." When I was in elementary school. There was a girl in my class who wanted to go to the bathroom. The teacher repeatedly refused her request and finally she shit herself. The teacher ushered her to the bathroom and put the turd in a plastic bag and held it in front of the class while the girl stood there next to her. Humiliated. Pretty sure she called the girl's parents to pick her up after that. The girl just sat in her desk with her head down until they arrived. Had a teacher who forgot to wear underwear plus had a hole in his pants accidentally teach a class with his big dig out. We all sat quietly because he was a kind person and no one though it was on purpose. Someone ended up getting up and going outside to find another teacher to tell him. He was so embarrassed. We would smoke pot before school in the morning. This new teacher started at the school who was very overweight and ugly. So we naturally were asshole high school boys and made fun of her. She realized how stoned we were when we came to class. So she started bringing us all kinds of cakes and candy and snacks every time we had her. She turned out to be awesome and we were such bricks at first. In 9th grade. We were watching a film. The lights were out and we were watching a film about our founding fathers. I am sitting in the back of the classroom and on my left is an odd fellow we had in our class. I started hearing shuffling and slight mhmph noises and take a look and see this kid's bare wiener and him going to town. I was in shock. Didn't know how to react, so I continued to watch the film. That's when I discovered Thomas Jefferson is multilingual. Kid never got caught. I was too scared to say anything. Well, we used to have study halls in the cafeteria. So everyone minding their own business. People start talking and out of nowhere someone stood up and goes, "Why are you jacking off in study hall?" The kid was full on big dig out jacking off at the corner table. I've never seen some try so hard to put their big dig away so fast and fail at doing so multiple times. In middle school I was in a class where 2 boys were busted for having a contest in class. They were jerking it and tried to see who would finish first.